Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. It is the football review show. We're going to be taking a look back at all the weekend's football action. We obviously had some big games, some big talking points, obviously, from the weekend as well. Donegal winning the Ulster Senior Football Championship via penalties, beating Armagh. We had Dublin, who won 14 in a row in the Leinster Senior Football Championship, and we'll be taking a look at all the best games as well from the Tailteann Cup, and certainly some big stories there. In particular, obviously, London beating Offaly. Joined here by Kevin Kennedy from the GA Sports Tracker app for this one. And Kev, how's things with yourself? I mean, the provincial finals are all done and dusted. And plenty of talking points from the weekend.
Yeah, huge amount of talking points the weekend, Aaron. Thanks for having me back on, by the way. Been away, but I know a chat and stuff in our WhatsApp group. Look here, I think that up here, definitely in Ulster, we benefited from having a 2 week break between the last game through until the Ulster final. And I know games are back in this weekend. I think that not even just from a player perspective, you have to feel for Armagh having to go back out this weekend to play again. Donegal, they'll have a bit of a hangover today or so, deservedly so, probably be out in a beer as well. But yeah, I think that we've learned a wee bit of a lesson that if you can squeeze one or two an extra weekend somewhere, it helps everything in terms of publicity and everything goes with it. But yeah, loads to discuss, loads to talk about today.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I suppose we'll crack into it with the Donegal and Armagh game. Donegal 20 points, Armagh 20 points. Donegal wins 6-5 on penalties. Quite the game, really. Like, shooting wise, both teams were absolutely brilliant. It obviously goes to a penalty shootout again. Armagh obviously have a 4-point lead in the second half. They have a 2-point lead in extra time as well. Like, I suppose the general consensus really is, how on earth did Armagh manage to not win this game? Like, they were in such a brilliant position, just as they were at times against Derry last year, and even against Monaghan in that quarterfinal last year. So, like, for Armagh, they'll be absolutely kicking themselves. Like, 4 consecutive penalty shootout defeats, which is definitely a first, obviously, in GA terms, but in general, like, you very rarely ever see that.
No, and especially considering the person who came up with the penalty scenario is from Armagh. You couldn't write it. No, look here. You would have hated being in that change room after you, wouldn't you? You know, everything comes down to belief, and but how many times can you keep going to that well and changing that mindset? We talk about some of the great teams, like the All Blacks, who were known as chokers before every World Cup. Even Mayo, you know, at some point that has to start sticking with you. But like the game itself, I don't think it was a fantastic game overall, but there was certainly an awful lot of the game that I did enjoy. As you mentioned already, aren't the shooting accuracy, and not only just the shooting accuracy, but some of them scores. Dara Wheel had an absolute wonder score. Closing stages of the game as well. They were just we were treated yesterday to an absolute shootout, and it came through. It got 65% conversion and 75% conversion, respectively, for Armagh and Donegal. I thought it was fantastic. I did think that that was the brilliant point about the game. But it had enough talking points on the negative side as well. You know, like the marks and shouldn't you, the way Armagh even approached it. Yeah, I think the way Armagh approached it was, for me, it was wrong. I think they played into the belief that Donegal are a team that rely on their long kick passes, and that's not the case. You know, the Derry, what happened against Derry was a complete blip. You know, there's no evidence of that is actually what their game plan is based around. They didn't score an awful lot from long kickouts, goals an awful lot from long kickouts in their league. They scored 4 goals in the league. They scored 4 goals in one match against Derry, and I think that was just in the psyche of the backlash, trying to protect it. They were a wee bit too cautious in the end, and as you mentioned, 4 points up, they should have had that game home and host.
No, absolutely, they should have. Yeah, like, especially being 4 points up in the second half. Like, I mean, and as you said before, like, their decision not to press the kick out was obviously a little bit odd as well. Like, why do you think they didn't do that in the end, or what do you think was sort of going through McGuinness's game plan, sort of going into the game? Do you think?
I think they were cautious. They watched the Derry game and they've looked at that and says, actually, do you know what? They are a danger on a long kick out. And I think the whole country has looked at that and says they are a danger on it. But actually, whenever you look at the data for it, they're not, this is the fourth time these teams have met this year. Taking the McGuinness Cup game out where Armagh sent up an under 20 team, the Armagh haven't conceded a goal against Donegal. In previously to 70 minutes of football, they hadn't conceded a goal against Armagh. So the idea, I think, that they dropped off was more of a precautionary, cautious approach to try and protect the house so they don't concede a goal on it. But if anybody was listening to BBC, you would have heard Philly McMahon talking just before the game. The return from Donegal's kickouts in terms of scores is 1-3, and that doesn't differ between long and short. Over the course of this season, it's been every third kick out essentially leads to a score. And Philly called that yesterday. At the end of normal time yesterday, it still was every third kick out resulted in a score for Donegal. Now, going into extra time, that increased to 3 and 5. That's where the return came from. On the face of it, what the data shows that there was no big difference in terms of, I think it was like an extra point that Donegal might have scored from their own short kick out comparing to in the league. But what was really interesting was you seen yesterday, Aaron, watching the game, whenever Armagh did turn over Donegal in the Armagh half of the pitch, down near about the D, around about the 21, those turnovers, particularly in the first half, they came about. They tried to kick the ball forward to try and get that ball up there as quick as they could. And what was really interesting was from it that in terms of scores, they broke even. 7 from their own kick out and 8 from turnovers. So you would imagine that the turnovers actually worked. But interestingly enough, they only had one wide from their own kick out whenever Donegal pressed them, which meant that Donegal set up. They couldn't get back to get set up. Whenever they went for a long kick pass from a turnover, they had 5 wides. So whenever you dig into the data itself, that the kick out didn't work. It worked for balancing their scores, but it reduced Armagh's opportunities greatly. And I think going in, why they done that? The down game, if you remember, Caelan Doherty for down second goal against Armagh, came from a turnover, that came from a break, and Armagh getting caught that bit slower than what Down are. And I think that played into their psyche whenever it came to dropping off against Donegal as well. But I don't think it worked.
Yeah, and I suppose for Donegal, obviously they dogged their way back into it and showed a tremendous amount of fight and spirit, which we obviously associate with Jim McGuinness and everything else. But shooting wise, as you said, absolutely outstanding. I saw one of Matthew Hurley's stats there, 74% shooting accuracy, which is incredible really for an Ulster final. But was it even Donegal's best performance though overall? Because even when you sort of look at their performance against Derry, I feel like obviously they went to extra time against Tyrone. They did look very leggy at times. So I do think they were there to be beaten in some ways.
Massively. I tweeted yesterday at Carol Kane and said it wasn't the worst Donegal team that we've seen, but in terms of their last 3 championship games, it certainly was the most underwhelming. Their shot count was way down. Before the end of normal time, I think they'd only hit 19 shots. We're used to Donegal hitting 26, 27 shots a game. Now, the amount of time they were very laboured on the ball at times. They kept a lot of possession because Armagh did have that drop back down. On average, their scores came about 20 seconds slower than what Armagh's did as well. So Armagh were quicker on them on the day. But there were so many points to it that, if it hadn't have been for wonderful shooting on the day, it would have been a horrendous game. It would have been because the shot count wasn't there. Sometimes, whenever you do it, you have to either you shoot and shoot often, and that way you can get away with 50, 60% of your conversion rates, or else you're shooting lower. And it wasn't that they were shooting easy shots. They were shooting difficult shots as well. It was an absolute spectacle in terms of their chance. But that was probably about the only really good thing about the game. Couple of turnovers that they done were okay. One with Greg McCabe being able to block him in down there on the left hand side in the second half, which forced a turnover as well. Not getting sucked out very quickly to the Armagh kick out where they claimed the 2 marks from. Even whenever you look at the 2 marks, the way Donegal approached it, it was almost facilitated by Armagh. Armagh allowed them to do it. I don't think it was a Rolls Royce performance by Donegal, but again, shooting on the day was the greatest winner, on it. And I think that Jim McGuinness touched on that. They'll enjoy today, but there's so much improvement needed in that team if they are to progress even further.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose for Armagh, especially going into the final 20 minutes, as we were saying, 4 points up, you're thinking at this stage, especially with it being the way the game was going, you're feeling like Armagh, we're only going to kick on really and sort of put the game to bed. Where do you think it went wrong for Armagh in the final 20 minutes? Because to not even score, I think after the 53rd minute was their last score before extra time. I suppose for Armagh fans in general, they'll be scratching their heads a little bit as to how they didn't see that game out in normal time.
Yeah, look, getting into the third quarter, they had an absolute purple patch. They got ahead by 4 points, and it was really good. Some of that facilitated by mistakes by Donegal, whereby they had two passes in the whenever they were on the counter attack in the Armagh half. They had two of those passes were overhit and put in difficult positions. Two of them actually went over the sideline. So Donegal weren't playing very well in the third quarter, but you always knew that there was a purple patch coming from Donegal as well. If you watch football for long enough, you'll see that a lot of teams, particularly those in maybe equal measure, will get 10 or 15 minutes of pure dominance. And for Armagh, that came in the sort of third quarter. Now, getting into the sort of last part of the game, I think Armagh definitely did try to play game management far too soon. You know, I think that whenever they had a period of the ball around about the halfway line that led to the two marks, it started off around about the 65th minute. Now, in football these days, you know, you have to at least account for at the very least 3 minutes of additional time. So if you're starting on 65 minutes and you're trying to manage that game, you're talking 8 minutes of game management of 1, 2, 3 points up. Even it's very difficult to do, considering what we've already talked about previously. That whenever Armagh had that 3 minutes, 4 minutes as a phase against Down, which resulted in a Jason Duffy point, that their hands teeth. They don't come about too often. The longer you have the ball in Gaelic football, the less likely you are to score. That's just what the data indicates. Just the longer you have the ball in Gaelic football, the less likely you are to score, and the less likely it is from play. It's more likely to happen actually from a free. And I think that whenever it came to the decision making for the marks that were actually happening, I think they presented good opportunities. I think that the marks were the right calls to make. I think not to shoot was the right calls to make. Primarily, Charlie O'Byrne, you know, he was 50, well, say 45 yards out, but on the left hand side, so maybe 50 yards out from the post. We're not used to Charlie O'Byrne scoring wonder points. You know, we're not used to that. So the idea of him being able to hit that ball over, he wasn't the right player on the ball. The Soupy Campbell, maybe it was on the other side, Soupy probably would have had a go at it. But again, it was far enough out for him to have a go at it. But seeing if you look at the marks, the call to go back and recycle wasn't the right call. What should have happened there was that whenever Charlie O'Byrne's got his mark, there was 9 Armagh players behind that ball. Behind him, he was the ninth man, and there was 8 other fellas, including the keeper, behind him. And that meant that there was at least 5 or 6 Donegal men in that zone in front of him that he couldn't see. He couldn't have played the ball in, so they had to go back for it. And the same as Soupy Campbell. Whenever Soupy got it out the right hand side, there was 12 Donegal men in front of him, almost unmarked or not engaged. What Armagh should have done was use that time to claim the mark, push that defensive line of Donegal further back, and even if the opportunity to score was too far, they could have created another opportunity from it there. But you could see the Armagh was all about game management, and unfortunately, we've seen it in the league final. They tried to do that as well. We've seen it from Armagh for a number of occasions where they get no this game management. If that's Kerry, if that's Dublin, if that's Derry, even it's crack on, crack on, and let's put another 2 or 3 points on the board from it. So I think that's just where it got into it. They get into nervy ground and they fell into the habits of game management, which for me is a concept that is almost dead now in Gaelic football. With big teams, with the good teams, they know that you can't rely on it. You have to keep on going for the juggler.
Yeah, plenty of comments flying in here. Karen says here, Tiernan's Kelly decision to take the mark was wrong. 2 minutes left. Should have recycled the ball and worked to score. Poor decisions from Armagh cost us, unfortunately. For Armagh, like obviously as you said, like it has been numerous times now where going down the home stretch of big games, they've had the games there to be won, as you said. Obviously in this game, 4 points up in normal time in the second half, 2 points up obviously in extra time as well. Last year, as we mentioned, they score a point deep into injury time of extra time. Before Monaghan obviously got down the other end and obviously get themselves that equaliser with Conor McManus. And then against Derry as well, I think there were 2 points up with a couple of minutes to go in an extra time before Derry managed to pull that back as well. So, like, is it something psychological, do you think, with this Armagh team? Or is it something tactical? Or where is it going wrong for Armagh? Because, like, you feel like they're doing the hard part and you feel like those final couple of minutes, not necessarily saying that that's the easy part, but you feel like they're putting themselves in the position that most teams would want to be in. But for whatever reason, on numerous occasions, they just can't seem to close it out.
For me, I mean, I've said it for the last 2 years. The year Derry won their first Ulster, which came out of the blue. I thought it was between Donegal or Derry and Armagh that year, and I did fancy Derry that bit more. Last year, I thought it was Armagh's opportunity, and they worked their way, and that's in January. I thought that their players would come on. Again, this year, I've been saying it for months. I thought Armagh's opportunity was now. For me, Armagh still have, in terms of pure talent and depth, they still have one of the best panels in Ireland. In Ireland, I think that man for man, if you were to score every player in that team, Armagh would be up in the top three. Sort of squad depth and everything goes with it. You just look at some of the players they brought on, the likes of Aidan Nugent, who hasn't really been playing an awful lot of football at all. Oisin O'Neill, Jason Duffy. I think the talent is in Armagh definitely, but I think that they've got their tactical setup wrong. And on the face of it, you might say, well, they scored. There was no great difference between the scores that they got yesterday from their turnovers and their kick. But whenever you actually dig deeper into that, the opportunity. I mean, you think about it. If you turn a team over, which Armagh do brilliantly, by the way. Armagh have this wonderful knack. You've seen it against Down, but it's almost like a game of cat and mouse where they're calling the player to come down a channel, and there's someone starting to. Grugan's very good at it. He wraps around the back, right, to sort of get in there and pounce. And that's a real strength to the Armagh game. We didn't see that at all yesterday. In fact, Armagh pressed up on one kick out. They won it and got a score immediately from it. And they done a half, three-quarter press on the second one, which went short and it ended up being flicked out over the side. I think that Armagh were far too cautious on it. And if they had have played to their strengths, they had it tactically set up to their strengths, the game would have been out of reach for Armagh, out of reach for Donegal. I just can't see how you can turn players over inside your own half, and the form of that is to give away. You miss five opportunities, five wades, and you only hit one wade from a 45, I believe it was. Whenever that team presses up onto you, you think about the amount of effort and energy it takes. If you turn a team over inside their own half, you have 5 or 6 yards before you can get a shot off, or at least that team's under pressure. If you turn it over 70, 80 yards down the pitch in your own half, the amount of energy you expend just on one run is not a huge amount, but multiply that by 10, 12, 15 turnovers. I think Armagh were only turned over 12 times yesterday. Off the top of my head, 12 times to Donegal's 21. So the turnovers were there for Armagh. They were turning over Donegal. Donegal had almost 60% of possession. The turnovers definitely were there. It was just energy stopping to try and get up there. And by the time Armagh got up, Donegal got back as well.
Yeah, we'll just run through some comments here in relation to the penalties. Patrick says, why are we having penalties in finals? Need to change this. Benny says it should have been a replay. Patrick also says replays need to be brought back. Armagh missed a crucial point, the last kick of the game. And Mikey says Armagh and Mayo very similar and that they find ways to lose games. Jack says maybe should bring back replays, but their own fault. They had enough chances to win. I suppose the first time when it happened against Galway, you could say they were unlucky. Obviously against Derry, you could say they were a little bit unlucky as well. And in fairness, the penalties yesterday from Armagh were very, very good. Do you know what I mean? They scored 5 out of 6 penalties. So I don't think penalties was the issue yesterday. They got one wrong, and these things can happen. But it is it is so unfortunate for Armagh. Should they maybe look at bringing back replays or whatever? Where do you kind of stand on that? At the same time, the game was there to be won in normal time, but Armagh fans must be sick of the sight of penalties at this stage.
Yeah, the Armagh fans, players, and they are sick of it. That's one element to it. The second element is they knew going into the game yesterday that if it went to a draw, if it went to extra time and then a draw, it was still going to be penalties. So it wasn't put on to them in the last couple of minutes. Says here, guys, we're actually going to go to penalties here. That was always there, and they knew that. Penalties at the minute, should it go to a replay? Yeah, probably going back to the good old days. You would say yes, but remember the amount of games that actually resulted in a draw. The numbers of draws in games now are greatly reduced. Massively reduced. I used to say to everybody every week, a draw was a good bet. And that's what people used to do, 8-1 or whatever. It's not a good bet these days. It's not in terms of the number of volumes of games we're playing. At the minute, it can't go back to the replays because it says, when would you have replayed yesterday's game? Wednesday night under light somewhere. The time frame doesn't allow for that, so it probably touches on what Charlie Burns is talking about around about maybe if we were to move to September, if we did have more breathing space. It then has to go back onto the counties to say you must run your championships and your structures. So there's a whole lot of ifs and buts about it. I was at a talk last night. Jim Gavin was given, and interestingly enough, his comments I thought were. I've no problem with penalties. I know that I couldn't hit a penalty, and any time I came in training, I would have dinked it and said, "Right, that's me." I was always the first one out whenever it came to your penalty shootout competitions. But Jim Gavin made an interesting point. He says, "Look, it's not part of our game. Roughly there's a penalty in every third game. So it's not as if over 70 minutes of football you're getting 2 and 3 penalties. It's almost like over 210 minutes, somewhere around about you're getting one penalty. So it's not a frequent occurrence. It's not like a free, it's not like a 45, but we've talked about those before and they didn't work either. Jim Gavin actually says that the idea of having a game situation might be more interesting that does away with penalties too. Now, it was only just a flippant comment he made on it, but something like, and I've seen someone put it on Twitter today, since we're no age, so you're 8, 9, 10, the whole way up, you're told, right, next team to score wins. If you had normal time, extra time, and then, throw the ball in again, next team to score wins and starts off, that to me, it's mad, it's out there. It's nowhere near about being talked about yet, but maybe that would be a potentially better way. Imagine the excitement around about that too. But yeah, look, penalties are here. We have to run with them. The players knew about them, and unfortunately, it's okay crying about it now, but it is what it is. That penalties are the best show in town at this point in time.
Yeah, Benny says here, first game, if it's a draw, next game, let it go to penalties. I would have no problem with that. Yeah, even like a golden score or something, I do think would be great. Would the game then drag on loads? Would teams be afraid to take the chance? And you then have the scenario where there could be a foul or whatever. It could be a dodgy decision or whatever. But look, those things happen going into the final minutes. To be fair, Mikey was saying here.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, you go for it. Yeah.
Just I don't think they're the best in the world. They're just the best show in town at the minute. We couldn't have had a replay because then you have to shuffle everything back in terms of the group stages of next weekend. Our calendar doesn't allow for that. I'm not a big. I don't know the data behind the split season, yes or no for it. Clubs I think are suffering this time of year due to the split season because I'm fed up going to games that are completely non-competitive and the standard is really, really poor. So we haven't got the split season right, but unlike what we do in the GAA of test it, doesn't work, throw it out, we have to make small tweaks to it and change it. And if that is maybe next year trial and that we push the back to September and that allows for a replay, maybe that will come into it as well.
Yeah, Mikey says here, Donegal's penalties were on a different level. They had power and placement. Armagh's were weaker and luckier. Yeah, there was probably one or two maybe that Sean Patton nearly saved before obviously McPartland's penalty was saved. Karen Wood says here, why not change the 45s? That would make more sense. That's what our players are skilled in. Yeah, I don't know about that one though, because realistically, not every team has 40. You know what I mean? Some counties only have one or two, maybe even one player. Who'd be good on 45s, and I just think that would. I don't know if that would work now, to be honest.
We had it not so long, a few years ago back now, Aaron, in Antrim, where back game went to extra time. It was draw to extra time, and it went into. I think at this stage it was a free. It was you had frees to see who, and there must have been 7, 8, two of the best free takers in Antrim. They were just standing there kicking balls over from 21s and a bit further out. The county chairman on the pitch says, "We're not doing this. This is a disaster. We're going to replay and we'll work it out." I don't think that 45s are the best way to go, because if you only have one player who can hit it, very few teams would have more than 2 players who could hit it. I think we tried that and it wouldn't work. And again, they're not a huge part of our game. If you're looking at game replication, 45s in the game would actually result in a score against probably at the most 2 or 3 per game.
Yeah, Mikey says crossbar challenge here as well. Yeah, maybe
headers and volleys.
Yeah, maybe that might be the best way to settle. In fairness, we were saying about Donegal, obviously, look, they got over the line in the end, and I was looking at some statistics there. Donegal have won 11 Ulster titles, I think, in their entire history, and Jim McGuinness has won 4 of them. So quite incredible. His first year in, and as you said, Donegal probably, like this Donegal side are definitely not the finished article by any means, as we said before. You still obviously, like Patrick McBurty's obviously had a couple of injury problems here and there. Oisin Gallen's a young enough player. You've got new lads obviously in the team. So like for Donegal, you're looking at their ceiling and thinking like there's no pressure on them really going into the All-Ireland series in terms of doing anything serious. Like you'd imagine they'll get to a quarter final. Anything beyond that, I think, is a bit of a bonus. But like looking at them and you're just thinking like, what a job Jim McGuinness has done there in such a short space of time.
Yeah, massive. And Jim McGuinness, from what I understand, what I believe, and what I hear, he's not this great, masterful, overcomplicated coach. He tends to keep things very simple. It's a hand pass is a hand pass. You don't have to hand pass after doing 3 cartwheels. It's not these where you would get people on Twitter and things whereby they're saying you have to run X, Y, and Z. It's very simple football. And I remember reading this book whereby he was in a hotel in Donegal the first time he met with the Donegal players. He made them look out over Atlantic and says, "We are Donegal. We face in the Gales every day. This is the wind. Our conditions are a hand passing game. It's a running game. We can't afford to kick the ball 50 yards up the pitch because our club football is not based around about that." And if you ever even watch like the Glentees whenever they play, their style of football is very much a hand passing game, but running. So I don't think Jim McGuinness has changed an awful lot this year in terms of tactics. I don't think he has. I think whenever you look back last year, that Donegal had an absolute nightmare last year in terms of things that were going on off the pitch, things were going on the pitch. They missed an awful lot of players last year. Even Paddy McBurdy being out, Oisin Gallen was riddled last year for most of it with injury. He came back, but if you remember, it got to the group stages, and this team under Aidan O'Rourke and Paddy Bradley run Derry, who went on to just miss out in the Ireland final. They run them to 50 odd, 52, 53 minutes. Very, very close. And then Derry kicked up the gear and they went on. So the potential was always there in Donegal. Getting players back in, getting the team back in there, and maybe picking up two or three other players from their club championships. But most of all, bringing that belief. Read about in the book again, he was going around everybody in December and January whenever he first came about saying, "We're going to win the Ulster Championship, we're going to win the Ulster Championship." And then people saying, "Why not do it again?" Why not? If you're telling people, even if it's lies that you're telling people, they're believing it and they're buying into it. And I say, I don't think that Donegal are fantastic tactically. I don't think that they are a team who rely on Patton's long kickouts. I think whenever you look throughout their season, they're a team who have confidence to shoot. They're one of the highest shooting teams in the league this year. I think he's brought a belief into them of shoot and shoot often and shoot whenever you want to shoot, and don't always look for that the safe option, which Armagh tend to do. And don't worry if we only get 50% conversion, because 50% to 26-13. You're up winning games at 13 points. And it goes back to maybe the way Malachy O'Rourke has Glenn playing as well. He's looked at what works and getting forward in numbers, trying to engage players. Come back to Rory Gallagher. That's what they're all about, engaging players and pushing that line back to give them opportunities for it. But yeah, it's that belief. Even McBurdy, I was looking at him yesterday, he looked disappointed whenever he came off. I was wondering, geez, he didn't shake Jim McGuinness's hand coming off or anything like that. But if you look at the camera after the one, who was in Jim McGuinness's hands around him, it was Paddy McBurdy. It just shows you that players who want to be there on the big stage, it's about buying into the team, and that's what he's definitely done this year.
Yeah, Macy says here, Armagh were the better team during the match and lucky not to win. I don't think Donegal ever led that game. They only managed to keep bringing it level. I think they led twice maybe in total, but it was for a very, very brief period. Definitely at the start of the game anyway. But overall, Armagh were definitely the side who led for longer. Kieran McGuinness obviously come under a little bit of pressure, obviously, on Twitter and everything else. Seen a few people obviously not too happy. Like, I suppose to take Seamus Brady's point from Sports Joe earlier, like, kind of crazy, really, with McGuinness. Like, if you were to change the results on penalties, he would have 2 Ulster titles, and Armagh would have played in 2 All-Ireland semi-finals, and who knows, maybe what would have happened after that. So, like, I suppose it's that Mayo thing again, where, like, they've done so much right, but they just haven't been able to get over the line. Like, where would you stand with Kieran McGuinness? Like, is it his last year? Like, or what needs to change, do you think, between now and the end of the season for him to still be there next year?
I don't know. I'm big fan of Kieran McGuinness. as a player, thought he was absolutely fantastic. Loved him playing. I remember he brought up Sam McGuire at my school the year that they won it. And it was a great, that just made me fall in love with the type of footballer that he is. And I think that he's done an awful lot for Armagh to get them up in there. But I don't think he's got it. I don't think that the idea of if they had went to 4 penalties, most of them games, last year's Ulster final for me shouldn't have got the penalties. I don't think this year's Ulster final should have got the penalties. I think had he have maybe just thrown a bit more caution to the wind, went about the game in a bit more of a risk taking manner, both of those games should have been Armagh's for me. I just think that tactically they've got. I think again, you can't for me you can't look at a team and say they're remarkable players. Even Oisín O'Neill came on yesterday, he scored an absolute beauty of a point from about 45, taking the angle in, maybe even 50 yards out. You look at Jason Duffy coming off the bench, I mentioned him before. You look at even Turbo, Subi Kent, they're all great players. But I just don't think that I think that they're more reliant on having really good players to get over the line than being tactically in a far superior place.
Yeah. Look, it'll rumble on for Armagh anyway, and certainly going into a group stage that contains both Derry and Galway. Like, it will be tough for them. They've obviously got Westmeath in there, who gave them a fairly good cut last year. So we'll obviously have to wait and see how they respond. Other provincial final was Dublin 119, Louth 212. Definitely a much closer game than people would have anticipated going into it. Finished as a 4-point win for Dublin. Have to say, like, Louth were very, very good in this game. Like, shooting wise, I think they must have only kicked maybe 2 or 3 wides in the entire game. Like, they went man to man with Dublin last year and got absolutely hammered. So obviously they were going to change it up. And to be fair, like, they made a good game out of this.
Yeah, and I think that there was a lot of strong performances from the Louth team itself. You think it looks. I thought Keenan centre half. I thought he had a very good game. He was a handful to it. Obviously, Graham's, who were well used to by now, and also Mulroy. Some of their scores that they were hitting were second and none. Like, they were fantastic. I was talking just to a mate last week actually, and the amount of progress that Louth have made in recent years is phenomenal. And especially for being the wee county, especially for being limited in terms of their size, they are a shining light to teams who are a lot lower down than them. For Antrim used to compete with Louth. We were playing Louth out all the stages. Louth had to overperform to beat us. So I think Louth had to take a great amount of credit for the amount of work that it has been on in there. I thought the game itself, look, we learned last year whenever Armagh beat down out the door, Conor Duffy adopted his game plan. It would have been naive for Brendan to come in and go toe to toe with him as well on that too. I think on the day Dublin, it wasn't a vintage Dublin performance. It wasn't that Dublin were very, very good on the day. But like Kerry last week, Kerry conceded a goal last week. Dublin conceded 2 goals this week. I don't feel sorry for Dublin or Kerry at all, but I think that going into sort of your finals against Clare respectively and Louth respectively, it'd be as hard for them boys to actually get a positive from it. I'm not saying they're not up for it, but if they don't beat these teams by 10 points, 12 points, it's almost not good. Terry heard Oisín McConville saying last week on the Thomas and look, Kerry, it's not Kerry. Kerry and Dublin don't play really much football until it comes into the All-Ireland semi-finals, the All-Ireland finals, and that's what they're building for. So that I think that's the hard part psychologically for Dublin to come through. And you can say what you want around about the hungers there and everything else, but everybody had them as wrote down to win it. Odds maybe of 1 to a few hundred anyway. It wasn't a vintage performance by Dublin, and there will be a huge amount of improvement needed for that if they are to progress as well. But Louth, fair credit to them, they adopted their tactics, and some of the scores they were taking were brave, they were ambitious, they were 40, 50 yards out, and they definitely learned from how Meath and Offaly played, because their game plan was that wee bit narrower against Dublin to try to keep Dublin more confined in their own defence.
Yeah, Harry says here, Dublin will not win the All Ireland. Trust me. There we go. Yeah, that's quite the statement there. But yeah, look, I think from a Dublin perspective, like I think Kerry are probably in this similar bracket as well. Like I think in previous years, like you'd win your provincial championship, you'd go straight through, obviously, to the quarterfinals. So it was all about really peaking, really, by the time the provincial final came around. But now, obviously, you have the group stages thrown in there, so you've got 3 extra games essentially, and like we all know, Dublin are going to get out of that group, no matter where they finish, like whether it's second, third, or first. Like they're going to get out of that group. So like, is it a case maybe that Dublin and Kerry are just taking their eye off the ball even more so now, with the fact that the group stages are coming in? Like, you feel like it could maybe actually be good for some of the provincial championships. It might give maybe more of a chance for your Louths, your Clares, your Meads, your Kildares to actually maybe close the gap a little bit in these provincial finals.
Potentially, yeah. Like, I mean, if there's one thing is that whenever you get into your provincial final, the benefit to Kerry and Dublin always winning Munster and Leinster respectively is that they will get a home draw in that first game of the group stage, which is massive. Kerry have to play Monaghan down next week in Kerry. That's a huge advantage to them. Like, it could have been Derry, that and the way the draw, it could have been Derry that they were playing down in there. That's just the way the draw could have worked out into it. And obviously Dublin have the home advantage for their team. It just makes that first game that wee bit easier than having to go off onto the road somewhere. Now, I think that you even look at Brian Fenton, was phenomenal yesterday, hitting all 3. Maybe O'Callaghan got the better score or the more scores on him, but for me, Fenton's got the scores at the right time. Whenever putting a bit of pressure on, he popped up and was getting a couple of scores in there. And you can see even like Kilkenny starting centre half forward instead of out in the left half forward. They're tinkering about with different things that are going on, and now is the right time to do it. But it's all geared towards. I mean, I think they went to Portugal today. They'll take a week off. They'll work really hard this weekend out in Portugal, just refining things, and they'll come back. We know the bounce factor that you have whenever you go to Portugal and come back from it. They will come back next week and they'll be refreshed and ready to go again. One thing I would say, and you'll remember me putting it up there against Meath, whenever you're playing the likes of Dublin and Kerry, you have to look for chinks, particularly Dublin. But you have to look for chinks in their arm because defensively, I think they're better than Kerry. I think Kerry, I've always had good forwards and can always score. And Kerry's mantra for a lot of years was you can score 16, but we'll hit 17, sort of thing. Even going back to the Galway shootout of 2022. I think for Dublin are more or less an all round perfection. You have to look for chinks in their armour. And I said it against me that there was something about that left hand side of the Dublin attack that they weren't scoring from. Weren't shooting from, but less scores from it. And I just looking at Matthews and the Gaelic stats man, his image yesterday, he was doing it. Dublin has 32 shots yesterday, 10 from the right hand side, 19 from the centre, and 3 from on the left hand side. And if you go back into that image and look, see your left half forward position right into almost the 21. It's completely void of any information. It's a blank zone. So something tells me that maybe Dublin aren't as confident kicking from the left hand side, but what they're very good at is working that left side for goals. And you'll see even likes of Scully, you'll look Con, they'll look as if they're about to tee up and drop the shoulder and go into the left, and that's almost where they get most of their goals from, that going past them that way. So I think there's learning. Kerry will be watching these, Derry will be watching these games. There's learning from everything in it, and if I was on the other team, that's only 2 games of what witnessed it in. Next week will be a different test of them as well. But it's something there that you can pick up against other teams, and if Dublin pick up on that, they can improve upon that. So I think there's lessons in it the whole way through.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, I think that is an interesting point of view, and now even that I think about it, yeah, like I think Colin Basquel was obviously playing in and around that position. He was very quiet, fairness, and Paul Mannion wasn't really in the game too much as well. But interesting enough, like for Dublin, like it's the first time they've actually conceded 2 goals in the championship, I think, since 2017. Since Cluxton's obviously conceded 2 goals in the championship since 2017. So a little bit unusual there for Dublin. Like I thought defensively, as you said, as you were saying, like I think Dublin defensively very, very strong. But yesterday, for whatever reason, with those 2 goals, just a little bit unusual. Whether it's because Mick Fitzsimon's obviously newly back in, but yeah, a little bit unusual seeing Dublin concede those 2 goals in that kind of nature. You probably wouldn't really be accustomed to seeing Dublin concede 2 sloppy goals like that.
And you see where the second goal in particular actually came from. It was an unorthodox play by Fitzsimons. He hand passed it over someone's head and tried to run on and get it up the other side and cut it. That Dublin would not do it. But you wouldn't do that if you were marking. If Gavin White was pressing, you wouldn't do it. If it was Ciarán McFall pressing, you wouldn't try and do it that way. So it was a bit of not naive behaviour, but unusual behaviour for them to do that. That's not something that they're used to. For the goals, I thought the Louth second goal in particular was very, very well worked by them. They were brave, everything went at it, and Mulroy, any other player probably would have took the shot from there. And you'll hear people talking about those slamming into the net, the sort of, it shouldn't be involved in Gaelic football and it's not in our sport and things like that. But I thought it was a fantastic goal. He still had a good bit to do because Phantom was hot in his tail. The committing Cluxon was in there. But yeah, they. I don't know why. I do know why Dublin continue to play Cluxton in the championship, but at some point in time, Aaron Cluxton has to step away for good. He has to
Mhm.
step away from good at it, and I would like to see Comerford play a bit more championship. I'd like to see him a bit more involved in the championship, not just be used as a league player because he is a great keeper, and the only way he'll be build confidence really in playing in championship is to actually be playing it. I think the risk reward thing for Cluxton in during championship games until it maybe comes to the group stages or even the quarterfinals, maybe that's then we have a tough question to make. But I think Comerford could get away with doing himself a world or getting more game time in championship matches.
Yeah, it's a hard one to know with Cluxton. Like we won't really know until like the latter stages where he's at. Like because obviously in the game against Mead, maybe a few kickouts went astray, but obviously that was his first game back. You couldn't judge any kickouts really in the Loud in this game because obviously how far back Loud sat back. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But for Loud in general, like and in particular for Jared Brennan, like I was looking at some of the Loud lads, like when the full time whistle blew, and I was looking at Samuel Roy like falling down to his knees. Like you feel like Loud, like they came to win that game, which might sound a bit mental, and I genuinely do think they believe they could actually go and win it, which is some testament to Jared Brennan and Loud to have them, I suppose, approach a game like that with such a brilliant game plan. Because in previous Leinster finals, when I saw Dublin come up against Mead, when Dublin would get a goal, Mead like heads would drop. Same would obviously happen with Kildare. Whereas with Loud, like they stuck to the game plan right until the final whistle, and even getting that goal at the end, like their heads never ever dropped, and like you have to really commend Jerry Brennan for that. I think.
Yeah, I think Loud need a lot of praise from where they are and what they're doing. I think that
Mm.
I can't remember who I was talking to last week. I can't remember who I was talking to, but someone who's involved anyway, and it says around about Loud and where they come from. In Antrim, rightly so, we're trying to get a stadium built, 33,000 seater stadium. Um, for Antrim, it'll sit empty for most of the year unless you're doing concerts in it and Ulster finals and stuff like that. For club games and stuff, it's an hour caution because you've been to games in Croke Park and the Seagulls are talking to you. You hear Seagulls more than you hear anybody else. But Loud, interestingly, they've done theirs a wee bit back to front. Instead of build it and they will come, Loud went the other way and they went, well, we have so much to do in terms of our structures, investing in our teams and getting our teams playing really well before we build the stadium. Now, the stadium's being built or it's at that stage now where it can't, but Loud are ready and prepared to go and play football in that. And that's the future of
Mm.
players. You only listen to Mulroy's podcast last year. A driven fella thinks he's the best footballer in Ireland. His belief is he's the best footballer in Ireland, and why not? If you can create that belief in yourself that you are, he definitely is up there. To do the work that he does, the scores he hits. Some of them, some of them scores he hit the other day were still traveling while they went over the bar. It just there's something going on with Louth that is much deeper than just running Dublin close.
Mm.
Louth are on a journey, and you see about the under 20s, Louth are on a journey for where they want to be this year, next year, and 5 years down the line. And I think the whole county in itself, the committees, the way they even have Darver. The minute I was down the other week, it's amazing. Like the amount of pitches around about there, whereby you have your senior teams and your under 20s teams and your maybe even development squads all trained together. That builds something. That builds an excitement around about it, and I think that's why, Brannon, he will. What it cost him just for Mickey Hart and Horse 100 grand. I don't think Brannon would be up around about it, but they'll still put as equally as much, if not more, money into where Larry are and what Brennan needs. And maybe that is more data analysts, maybe it is more time, maybe it is boys getting more recovery, subsidizing them from work, whatever it is. But they're willing to invest in that, and I think it's great from the sea. They
Mm.
definitely see where they're going.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and you had the Louth under-20s beating the Dublin under-20s there the other week as well. Like, so they
Oh,
are. There's so much
can't
there.
hear you there, Aaron.
Oh, can you not
Can you hear
know?
me still?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, yeah. You can't hear me.
What happened there?
Can you hear me now? Oh,
Nice. Right, you can obviously hear me, but I can't hear you.
yeah, yeah.
If I leave and come back in, does that work?
Yeah. Maybe try that. Yeah, maybe try that, and we'll see. We'll see how we get on. But yeah, no. As I was saying there, like I think for Louth and for Ger Brennan in general, like the amount of like the work that they're doing at under-20 level, I think is an absolute breath of fresh air from a Louth perspective. In fairness, yeah, we'll maybe run through some other comments here until Kev comes back in. Oisin was saying here earlier, Cavan to shock Mayo. Yeah, look, that would be a surprise. Do you know, I wouldn't bet against that, to be honest with you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's us. Don't know what happened there.
There we
Someone
go.
was ringing me, so it probably knocked it off.
No bother at all. No, look, in general, anyway, what I was saying is like like obviously the Louth under-20s beat the Dublin under-20s last week, so they're doing so much right. In fairness, they've obviously had to compete with soccer very well, and they do seem to be bridging the gap there, which I think is great to see. And even the size of their players as well, because one thing that's always stood out to me when Dublin have played Meath and Kildare over the last sort of 10, 15 years is like there's such a huge gap in terms of the size of the Dublin players and the size of the Meath and Kildare players. And obviously they've had a lot of young teams and young players coming through and everything else. But like you look at Conor Grimes, you look at Samuel Roy, you look at Tommy Dernan, like physically they were more than able to compete with Dublin. And I haven't seen that in Leinster in a long time, to be honest.
Yeah, and you obviously you can't pick their mummy and daddy. So in terms of growing all men over the head of 6 foot, 6'3", 6'4", it's not there unless you're going to willing to invest in genetic modifications or so. But you see the likes of Louth who obviously invest heavily into their strength condition, but the right strength and condition from a young age. Meath have always done this thing whereby they double set, so they would do their gym work before or after their pitch session on the same evening. And maybe that is something around about their strength condition and getting actually physically bigger, isn't there? But you can see just see with Armagh. Armagh are a big team, and Donegal aren't. So it's just playing your own strength down wouldn't be a physically big team as well. But having those bigger players in there obviously does help because you're able to compete for higher balls or able to hold men off. But you can also get that balance of the running game from your sort of smaller, nippier, quicker men too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I suppose we'll run through some games from the Tailteann Cup, obviously at the weekend, and we'll go with Group 4 first because there was a result here that I think very much shook up the GA world a little bit. Offaly 12 points, London 220. Like when I saw this scoreline originally, I was thinking, geez, the Offaly lads must have went to London and they must have just been on the beer the whole weekend. But then I saw the game was actually in Tullamore, so. Yeah, quite remarkable. Like a 14-point win for London, their first championship win since 2013. Like Jesus, like what on earth happened here? Like especially for Offaly, like obviously they're on the receiving end of a huge defeat to Dublin the last time out, but nobody would have saw this coming.
No, definitely not. I think London, to be fair to them, they beat Mayo in January in the Connacht League or something like that, and throughout the league, I was sort of keeping an eye on them to see if they were getting close, so they were maybe nipping a win here or there. Because the likes of Waterford, next to London, you like to see them for the amount of effort that they do put in, to get some sort of reward. But I had to look. I was going to say twice. I had to look a few times at that result. I probably maybe if it had been a point in it, I would. But what has went on with Offaly? The 14 points at home. I haven't looked at it in depth to see what players and stuff were there, but an absolute shock. You're 100% on that.
Yeah, like I was just looking at it there, like 10 different scores for London overall. So really good effort from them. And just looking on Score BO, like the Offaly team that was there, like I mean, Jack Bryant was playing, Keith O'Neill was playing, Dylan Hoyland who was there, Keane Farrell was there, Cormac Egan was playing, Lee Pearson. Like so, it was more or less nearly their best team. So yeah, quite bizarre there in many ways. Other game was down 120. Limerick 1-6. I suppose this game going more according to plan from a Down perspective.
Yeah, obviously we talked previously around about Down. The two games we've seen on TV probably has been a great showing of them in terms of what they are going forward in terms of their attack. But hitting 120 in any game of football, is fantastic too. 21 scores, you would imagine they're probably up around about 60% conversion there. So they got to maybe 30, 33, 35 shots. But yeah, Down will be a hot. They'll have a bee in their bonnet to win this. After not making the sort of the cutoff for the All Ireland, the Sam Maguire.
Absolutely, yeah. I think they'll certainly be one of the favourites anyway, no doubt about it. And obviously, having lost the final last year. Looking at Group 1, you had Leitrim 17 points, Waterford 12 points, and then you had Kildare 325, Longford 111. I suppose much was made about Kildare obviously playing this game in Hawkfield, obviously a first actual home game in a couple of years, obviously for Kildare, I think since the league last year. But all in all, huge win for Kildare, and some win to put out there, like what, a 20-point win for Kildare. Not so good for Longford though.
Yeah, not good for Longford, but to be fair to Kildare, it shows you the respect they're paying to the competition. They've managed to keep the players in there, keep them on board, and put in a performance like that. It could have been pretty easy for Longford to maybe drop 15 behind the ball and try and frustrate them and play the game like that for it. Longford probably are not in the best of places, but Kildare are certainly anything less than a 10, 12-point victory for Kildare would have called questions on him. So the answer like that, fair play to him, fair play to Glenn Ryan and the management team, and it's also his players to treat this competition with the respect it does deserve, despite them maybe other commentators saying they're probably too good for it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a massive response for Kildare, and they definitely needed it. In fairness, like it, Kevin Feedy, 4 points from him, 2-1 from Paddy Woodgate, Derek here 1 with 6 points, Paddy McDermott 1-2 as well. So all the big forwards stepping up there. In fairness, Group 2 then, you had Sligo 221, Wexford 215, and we had Antrim 412, Tipperary 213. So I suppose firstly, massive win there from a Sligo perspective, obviously getting past Wexford, close enough game. But for yourself, like Antrim, big win versus Tipperary. So I suppose Antrim look semi-finalists of the Tailteann Cup last year. You must be hoping anyway that Antrim can kick on under Andy McEntee and make a fist of it this year.
Yeah, like big score, to get 4 goals in any game is welcomed, especially going into the game, looking at Tipperary from where they were in the league. Form wasn't great. The championship obviously paid by Waterford, so probably expecting a win. But the manner in which they did win was much welcomed. Obviously, Sweeney's back in for Tipperary, which was be a welcome boost for them. As I don't think Antrim, I wasn't at the game, but I don't think by reports Antrim looked at any stage of losing that game. Some of the stuff I did like, so maybe players, Big Rory McCann back in there, Adam Loughran back in there too. So McEntee's starting to get a few players back in that will hopefully aid their run in the Tailteann Cup. And if it stays, all the boys stay there and stay fit, maybe they will get a run into it, but it'll be much harder this year than what it was last.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose speaking of McEntee's, then obviously the Sligo victory there as well. Sligo definitely dark horses, you'd say, for this competition.
Yeah, definitely number 3. At the minute, the way McEntee has been playing, how they played against Galway, their approach and manner after the Galway defeat, it was a case of wasn't it a great game of football? We came here to give a good game of football. We came here to win. I think that they're probably less dark horses now because of their performance have justified where they are. You'd have Down and Kildare still right up in there, but I think they're sitting in 3rd place as third favourites for it.
I'm just looking at the final group then. It was Laois 217, Carlow 217. This was the feature game, obviously, on the Sunday game last night. Carlow with 2 goals right at the death there. So Laois obviously won't be too happy with that. And Fermanagh 316, Wicklow 9 points. Huge win for Fermanagh there, in fairness. Considering Wicklow obviously nearly beat Kildare a couple of weeks ago. I think some people were looking at Wicklow as dark horses as well, but I suppose you can't really sleep on Fermanagh. That's a huge win there.
Yeah, no, I haven't watched Wicklow. I don't think they're up there. I don't think that they'd be anywhere near sort of calling them dark horses for it. I think obviously pushing Kildare, almost beating Kildare was a missed opportunity for them. But I think they put in a performance there that goes against the grain, really. And to try and back that up and replicate it again would be very hard. But it still is a huge score for Fermanagh. Fermanagh haven't had a good year. They had a very good start to their league campaign, couple of sound performances in there, and then sort of died off a wee bit. But again, Fermanagh have to be up there with potentially the team to be considered. I would say they're probably more dark horses. I don't think they are going to win it, but they definitely are up there with a shout of giving it a good go, especially after the drumming that Armagh give them.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously they came down from Division 2. They were a little bit unlucky, like finishing with 5 points. And just looking at it here, like 12 different scores in total there. So quite a game there from a Fermanagh perspective. In terms of player of the week and moment of the week, what would you look towards? I suppose a lot to choose from.
Yeah, I said earlier on, I like Dara Wheels score on the right hand side for Donegal. Mulroy score from out on the left hand side against Dublin in the second half. I thought was fantastic. I did like Keenan's goal. I like the run he went, how he got the ball at pace. I thought Oisin O'Neill's score, and even Oisin O'Neill just coming onto the pitch, had a massive influence in that game. How he doesn't start for Armagh, I think he deserves that. I think his performances every time he's come on the pitch has been there. I thought Oisin Gallen had a great first half against Donegal too. Moment of the week is probably going to be the Louth second goal. I just thought it took a bit of risk and a bit of bravery to do that. And the lead up to it, the Harrington, Fitzroy, I think they've done an awful lot to get that goal. So I'm going to put that down as the moment of the week for it. Player of the week, Niall O'Donnell for Donegal, I thought was a pain in the Armagh side all game. He was relentless, never stopped running. I think he got man of the match from the RT side of things, but if not, then he definitely deserved it. I'm going to put him down for player of the week.
Yeah, probably edge towards Oisin Gallen, but I do think Peter Mogan had a very, very good game for Donegal as well, in fairness. But there we are. Yeah, look, in terms of moments of the week, I think just seeing another penalty shootout and Donegal obviously coming out on top of Armagh, like 4 consecutive penalty shootout defeats. Like that's just absolutely crazy. In fairness, before we go, I suppose Kev, remind people of your app, GA Sports Tracker app. Like where can they find it? And yeah, I suppose if you want to tell them what it's all about.
It's you get the app, just download any mobile device, be it your phone or an iPad or whatever it is. You get it from both the Google Play Store and also the the Apple Play Store as well. Just download it on your phone, and what it does, it takes data in a different way. It tracks phases of play rather than actual whole numbers, so you can actually see your return for short kickouts, long kickouts, turnovers, all in real time as well. So if you're not on Twitter, you're not following us on Twitter, go on there and have a look and get yourself into it.
Perfect stuff. And Mikey has a great comment here to finish up. GA police stormed a Ryanair plane this morning and forced London players to give urine samples. But yeah, look, Mikey, you said that, not us. So don't want to get in trouble there.
Probably trying to claim all the Magners or Guinness back.
probably. Yeah. Look, it was some win for London. Do you know, actually, I think that was moment of the week. Actually, in my opinion, like for London to win like that, and put in a win like that against Offaly. When you actually look at Limerick on the slide a little bit as well, like there's actually a great chance London could maybe go on a bit of a run now in the Tailteann Cup, which I think would be absolutely brilliant. Well, look, we'll wrap this up here. Kev, cheers very much for coming on, and anyone who tuned in, if you could hit the like button and subscribe, that'd be very much appreciated. And anyone who's listening on any audio podcasts, if you could give the podcast a rating, that'd be absolutely brilliant again. And we will speak to you all in the next one.
Cheers, Aaron. Thank you.